my name is Oddfell and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing a tutorial on how I made this vest for my Spice and Wolf cosplay. Now, full disclosure before we get super into this, I do have to say I did make this costume about a year and a half ago, maybe a little bit more. I am just now getting around to editing it, but because of that, no information, art, or anything like that about the reboot was out yet. So any references that I'm talking about are pertaining to the old anime and the manga. I know that there are some color differences in the new anime. I simply didn't know it existed at the time. So if there's things you do want to tweak for the color palette of the new anime, do keep that in mind because it's not part of my references or research. Now let's talk fabric, because one of the things I really wanted to achieve with this costume was making it feel real and grounded despite being a fantasy look. And what I mean by that is Spice and Wolf is set in a medieval fantasy setting that feels very much so like medieval Europe, and because of that I wanted fabric weights and textures that felt like they would be believably from that time period. I didn't want things that felt too modern or too lightweight for what I feel like would be in this setting in this fall-winter time. So what I was looking for was fabrics that were wool or suede for the skirt and the vest, and I ended up with a beautiful suede, which I'll show here in a little bit, as well as a black fur. I ended up doing a fur slightly longer than I had originally planned for. I originally wanted something shorter, kind of like a fake mink fur, since they deal so heavily with minks in the show. And this might be something I go back and change, but I am happy with this longer fur. I think it does give a little more texture that maybe the light fur wouldn't have. But I was very, very back and forth on the fur, so maybe you disagree with me and you go with the shorter mink fur, but this medium length fur is pretty nice. I wouldn't suggest going much longer than this for the lapel and the base, just because you don't want this to get too puffy and out of control. An optional fabric step that I also took was I chose to line the vest because I felt like in certain angles it might be slightly open and you might see it. So I found this really cute cotton that had a wheat-like texture to it. It's a nice gray, so it's kind of neutral, and I thought it was a nice little added detail so that way if you do see a little bit of my vest open, it's something that feels like it could still be part of the show, part of the character. I love a good inspired lining fabric. Now, as far as color palette goes, in the manga, she has this charcoal gray to black looking skirt and vest. Seems to be more in line with the colors we're seeing from the reboot show. However, I do really like the coziness the navy blue brings in the anime series, so let's get into that. Anime, her dress and skirt tend to be this kind of purplish toned navy blue, and I went on the hunt for it because some of her statues is a little more blue, but most of the time it skews a little more purple, but it's definitely too navy blue to just be purple fabric, if you know what I mean. So that is something to keep in mind depending on what shade you want to do. I did end up finding a very nice, rich, purpley toned navy blue fabric. Now, if you are doing it from the new anime, it appears from the glimpses we've got so far it might be black, in which case you'll probably have an easier time finding fabric, but if you're trying to find navy blue, I definitely suggest suede. I had a much easier time finding navy blue suedes with much more of that purple violet tint to it than I did wool fabrics. Here's also a color comparison on the figure to the fabric I ended up finding. I'm letting you guys know now, if you are making an anime costume, it is helpful to get some type of 3D reference, whether it's a statue, a figure, or something, because it does help bringing something 2D to 3D when you can actually see a sculpt of it instead of just a 2D rendering of it. And in this case, it also helped for kind of visualizing colors in real life and not just how they look in different lightings in an anime. But I'm pretty happy, honestly, with this color matching. Look at that. Before we super get into this too, I also do want to say this is going to be a very beginner-friendly tutorial because I am still relatively new to sewing. I know what I'm doing, but I'm not by any means like a sewing master. So there might be things where you look at it and go, I know a better way to do that, and that's fine. Do that thing. But if you're new to sewing, here are some things that I learned while making this project and how I made this project that will certainly help you out. Now, what you're going to want to do for the next step is I found a vest with a similar silhouette Obviously the one I use, and you'll see in the next clip, is a sweater vest, so I did have to account for the fact that it's stretch and there's no open front, but it ended up working out for what I wanted. So I found a vest that essentially had the same lining cut that I wanted for my vest. The next step was to move on to figuring out where the seam lines needed to be in this new hypothetical vest, if there was any clear and obvious seam lines on her costume, and there were. Both in the manga art and in the statues, there was clear seam lines. One of the most clear references I used was this figure from Pop-Up Shop by Good Smile, because it gave me a really nice 360, and as you can see, there's a seam in the front, and there's 3 seams here in the back, but there is no side seam, and you'll see me talking about that in a little bit. And this did seem consistent with the manga when I was looking at it. There isn't really seams shown very often, if at all, in the anime, largely because it's in motion, but the manga and this were pretty consistent.
Okay, so what I'm going to be doing now is I'm taking this vest here, and I'm going to trace half of this front panel, and I'm going to be making a dart, and I'll try and document the process of adding an in-shoulder dart, and then I will be tracing the back split in half as well and doing a traditional side seam dart, and hopefully I can make it make sense. Now, tracing this vest aside, something else to note is this is where the seams seem to lay, both in the art and on the statues. There doesn't seem to be a side seam here, no pun I guess intended. So what I might end up doing is making this and this piece one and joining it at the side with the patterns if it looks like it's going to line up right. But if not, we'll just have a side seam for ease of use and realism, and we'll make it work. But if we can nail these front and back ones, I think we'll be golden. So those are the ones I'm definitely aiming to get correct. So essentially what I've done here is I've drawn a straight line through the middle of the pattern and a dashed line for around the halfway point of the pattern. And then on the bottom I gave it an inch, and the top I gave it a ½ inch because I was nervous about losing the whole shoulder piece. But essentially I've drawn a dart here, and now what we're going to do is we're going to cut the pattern pieces along each of these outer lines like so, and that's going to add a princess cut seam. So we've done the same with the back, except this is going to be a traditional princess cut. So we've drawn a straight line from the armpit seam, and then this is the halfway point between the center of the back and the side. And we've drawn that up. I did another inch on the bottom and another ½ inch on the top, and drawn that line. And then we're also going to round out this corner because we don't want it to come to a corner. We want it to have a nice curve to it. And now we're going to cut this out as well. So here's our final pattern. All of these will get cut out twice, obviously. I'm making it out of muslin real quick, and I'll be back with the mock-up to show you guys how it turned out.
So as you can see, the mock-up turned out pretty okay. There were some minor things I did want to tweak though. It did fit a little tight, and some of this is because, again, the vest I traced was a stretch fabric. So this muslin and this fabric that would be the final fabric were also not stretch fabrics. So testing it out on the muslin let me see where I needed to enlarge it a little bit and how much it needed enlarged. And also, as you can see, where I cut wasn't a straight line on the final project. Probably, again, because of the way it stretches and the way adding princess seams changed the front neckline, because adding seams like that will kind of change the shape. So essentially what I did was I just made all my pieces a little bigger, and I changed the angle of that front line that went in between and would become, I'm lost in the vest, and would become this line. I just kind of squared it in a way where this would be straighter, because it was kind of angling that way based on my mock-up. But these are all things you can tweak after doing your own mock-ups to make sure they fit your body in the way you need them to.
Okay, so I altered the pattern slightly, and now I've traced it onto our fabric. I'm not going to make a second mock-up, so I'm just going to have to hope that this works. I just kind of buffed the size. I made everything a little bit bigger too, even though I altered it just in case, so that way I can take stuff out. But hopefully this works, and hopefully it looks good.
Alright, so here was our first fit of the vest ever. I was worried about it being a little bit baggy, but I was really excited that all of my seams came together and with how good it looked. So I did have to throw on a shirt underneath just to see how it looks, since it is a second layer on this costume. But over a shirt, it was fitting much, much better, and I was so, so excited with how this turned out. I feel like my reference video also does make it look a little more wrinkly than it is. While this did pucker a little bit more than the muslin did, it also still lays pretty flat as a seam. So the pattern does work if you want to follow those tips for making princess seams. You just gotta kind of finesse your fabric and ease it a little bit if it's something as picky as this suede was. I just feel like that reference video of me trying it on for the first time, the back does look quite a bit puckered. And when it's on, it definitely does not look that puckered now. I think some of that was pre-liner and pre-getting the rest of the bits and bobs on. Alright, so if any of you have filmed tutorials before, you know sometimes you accidentally forget to film steps. I didn't really talk about the patterning process or the sewing together process of my lining fabric, but essentially what I did was I just cut out the same pattern. I cut out for the suede onto my lining fabric and essentially made a vest that was an inside-out mirror of my vest. And as you see in the videos above, I'm just going to sew them together. This is my first time doing lining, and there's a couple things I changed. Like, I feel like it ended up being a little bit big, a little bit baggy, but essentially what you're going to do is just mirror your pattern and sew the inverse vest into your vest, and voila, you have a lining fabric. Alright, so here is that, like, inverted vest I was talking about, where essentially it's going to fit right in. And before we go and sew these two together, I need to stress so much how important it is to press your seams so that way everything lies flat against each other. So I press the seams of the suede and the cotton. Now with suede, you're going to want to be very, very careful with very low temperatures, but please press your seams. So here's the two vests sewn together. I'm really happy with how this turned out. It was my first lining project that I had ever done, and I think it turned out pretty well. I got my seams pretty clean, and you're going to want to make sure the seams that can show and be visible are the cleanest. The bottom of the fur here, I will talk about the process. I think I have some video clips in the skirt tutorial of how I do this, and I think that's probably why I didn't film myself doing it on the vest. But don't worry, the process is identical for what I did on the skirt and the vest, so I will be sharing that footage right now. I think I figured I would probably just drop all the tutorials at once, so filming this process once was enough. So without further ado, here's how to do the trim on the bottom of the vest. Okay, so trim at the bottom of the skirt, we're going to be using this for trim. It's just for trim from Joann's. I just got the whole bolts because there's 5 yards on here, and I need about 4.8 yards for the skirt and the vest, so I just got the whole thing. I think I'm going to arbitrarily start in the back. I should be able to layer the fur in a way where you can't see where the seam is, but just in case you can, I'm going to put it in the back. Now, what I am going to do too, before we start pinning, is I'm going to fix this edge where it's bluntly cut. I'm going to pull back the hair that's not cut, and kind of part it. So you can see where the good fur is, part it, and then cut off the part that's been poorly cut. And then we're going to start pinning. So as you can see now, we have a much more blendable edge than we did with this terrible, terrible blunt cut. Now another reason I'm starting with a skirt is just so I can see how much I need, and we're going to cut it at the very end when we loop it instead of trying to pre-measure amount. And this is going to consume the most amount of trim, so I'm just starting with the skirt. We'll see how much it takes, we cut it when we get to it, and then we'll move on to the vest, because I can always get more for the vest, but I need this to be one piece. I don't want to deal with multiple seams on the skirt, so we're starting with the skirt. So what I'm going to do first is go through and pin this about probably that far in, like maybe a quarter of the way into the fur, and we're going to sew that line first, so that way we don't have to worry about lining it up, and we can worry about volume, because our stitch line is going to be covered by the fur trim. And this way we can kind of roll our edges and have some nice volume and not have to worry about matching these two up to keep this underside sewn. So I'm going to go ahead and pin up the whole underside and I'll show you what I mean.
So now that we have our pins in place, the fur goes to about here. I'm just going to sew in the middle of this, probably with a straight stitch. I might do a zigzag, but it's not stretched, so I really don't need to. So I'll probably just do a tight straight stitch all the way through, and then I'll come back and show you what we're going to do with this. So now that we have our seam lines, what we're going to do is we're going to roll about that much in, just enough to sew. So make sure there's enough you feel like you're sewing, and then roll it. And you want this to lay as flat as possible. So we're going to go through and we're just going to adjust the height, and we're going to pin that down with it rolled and with this laying flat all the way around. And then I think I'm going to sew, I did this with a zigzag. I might sew this with a zigzag as well, just for extra security. And then what we'll do afterwards is take a wig brush to brush all of the hair out of the stitch lines.
So you fold over this edge as well, and then you're going to sew this rolled down edge all the way down. In rolling it like this, not only would it kind of cover and wrap the whole edge like I needed, but it also added a bit of volume to it, because as you can see, there's a bit of volume to her fur. Now, one of the things I was back and forth on was fabric texture, because honestly it kind of looked like she had wool on her vest and fur on her skirt, but in a lot of the other art it looked like it was the same. So that is up to you. But for fur, I thought it had enough volume that just doing this wrap method was enough to kind of give it that, you know, plush kind of round feeling fur trim.
Alright, so here's our swatch of fur for the lapel. I'm kind of laying it here and seeing how I want to shape it, seeing where I want to cut away, and how I want to get that tapered look to it. So to attach the lapel, what I've done is I've rolled the underside closest to the neck down, and I've tacked that down with some stitches, but I'm leaving our lapel side untacked for now, so that way it doesn't bunch weird, and also so that way we can get in and cut it. As you can see, I've pulled the fur away in the position we need to cut.
So not so much on this, but definitely in the manga and the anime, you can see the lapel comes to kind of a pointed taper shape here, kind of like a triangle wedge, and then forward up, like a kind of normal lapel shape, honestly. And if I can find some good references, I'll pop them. Yeah, I'll pop them here if I can find some good references of that. So essentially what I did with this, and I'll have a couple videos, is I started the fur at the halfway seam and I sewed it forward. And then honestly, if I'm being real, this is a raw edge here. I cut the shape of my taper to match what I was seeing on all the reference art, and then it is just simply down. I could have finished this edge, but I was worried about it getting bulky, and I was worried about it making the fur fall strangely, so I didn't do that. So you're going to want to make a seam here, so that way your fur is going the same direction forward, so that way when you wear it, it lays nice like this. Because if you do one long strip, it's going to be facing upwards on one side, and you don't want that. So definitely, and I didn't show this super well in my clips, so I'm emphasizing it here. You want two pieces going down, going down. Now the last thing about this vest is the closure. I had not made it yet for mine, but I do want to talk about it because the new anime has a different closure. So the way I plan to do my closure for this one is more based on the original, which it's kind of blocked by her necklace on here, but essentially what it is a leather strap that goes this way and one that goes this way with a buckle in the middle. What I'll probably do is sew a leather strip here, a leather strip here, and where they overlap, I'll have a Velcro piece and then an ornamental buckle that I will attach, probably hand sew on, that doesn't really work as a buckle. Velcro attachment instead of a working buckle, just because the shape of it and the overlap would be really complex for a buckle to work. Now, if you want to do the modern anime version, the good news is it's just a toggle. It's just a toggle. It's two hoops. One of them has like one of those horn toggles. Boop, it hooks. That's the vest closure. So that'll be a lot easier if you guys are doing the new anime version, but that is the last thing I have to do on this. So I need to go back and finish that. But that is our vest, and that is my vest tutorial. Here is a full look at our final vest. We've got the nice taper. You can hear my cat. Hi. Yeah. So here's a nice final look at the vest. This is a thicker sweater than I normally wear, so keep that in mind, because the sleeves are bunching a little bit just because of the thickness of the sweater. But we've got the seams laying nice, we've got the fur trim, we've got the lining, right? Look at that. Oh, here's the back. Yeah, so thank you guys so much for joining me on this tutorial. This is my first time actually putting out a full video tutorial for something, so if you have any questions left at all, please do let me know down below in the comments. I should be getting the skirt tutorial up soon as well, because I want to see what you guys get crafting with your Holo costumes. If you do use this tutorial, even if it's not for Holo, please tag me in it. I would love to see what creations you guys make. Also, since you guys heard her, here's my screaming kitty. She likes to meow. I know. That's my cat. She is constantly yelling. She is still yelling right now. Oh. Yeah? Thank you so much for watching. I really do hope this video is helpful, and if you want to see more like it, please subscribe and hit the little bell notification so you see every time I post. Good luck crafting! Thank you to my patrons who make videos like this possible. If you'd like to see behind the scenes on my most recent cosplay builds, early access YouTube videos, and even exclusive photo sets, make sure to check out my Patreon and join the fun! Special shout out to my Myar, Christopher B, Christian W, Vampire Hunter D, and NY Nightwing.